Good afternoon. Welcome to the Analyst. Today we'll be taking up 7 newspaper articles from the Hindu and the Indian Express and discussing them. The handout for the same will be available in the description of this video for your kind perusal. Please have a look at that. The first article that we'll take up is related to solar energy, as the installation of solar power in some off-grid villages in Jharkhand has been appreciated in the governance awards. The second article is related to India-Mauritius relations, as Prime Minister Modi is slated to visit Mauritius and a white shipping agreement is on the cards. Additionally, we'll take up 5 articles in the simplified which will help you in your prelims and mains preparation. Now, the first article is related to solar energy. The context behind it is that an initiative in Jharkhand to connect some off-the-grid villages also with solar power has been appreciated. So we will discuss the significance of solar energy for India, the potential of solar power, the advantages and the factors limiting the usage of solar power in India, and the government initiatives in this regard. This is important in GS paper 3 under the topic Infrastructure Energy. Now first let us look at the potential of solar energy adoption in India. These are a few data points. They have been borrowed from the website of Ministry of New and Renewable Energy. When we look at the solar energy as a percentage of total renewable energy in India, in 2020 it was about 1/4. About 25% of the total renewable energy was coming through solar power. And we have a target of increase the proportion of solar energy in our total renewable energy mix to about 50%. When we look at the potential, we have about 5,000 ton kilowatt hour per year of solar energy that is incident upon the total land area of India. As per the National Institute of Solar Energy, if we are able to install solar photovoltaic cells upon 3% of the wasteland area of India also, then we can generate a potential of about 750 gigawatts of energy. When we look at the solar photovoltaic cells deployment, India is the 5th country in the world. 5th largest solar photovoltaic cells deployment is there in India, as per the statistics of the Renewable Energy Capacity Statistics 2023. When we look at the installed capacity of the solar power in India as on 31st January 2025, as per the Ministry of New and Renewable Energy, it is about 100.33 gigawatt. And as a percentage of renewable energy, currently the solar energy accounts for about 47%. As per the Panchamrit goals that India has adopted and reiterated at the Conference of Parties 26, we have a goal to increase the renewable energy to 500 gigawatts by 2030, and we also want to achieve the net zero carbon emissions target by 2070. Now, when we look at the availability of solar energy in India, we can look at it from this graph that most of the solar irradiation that is incident upon the land of India, it is there in the central western India, for example, Rajasthan and Gujarat, and the southern India, especially Tamil Nadu, Karnataka, etc. When we look at the states which are driving the renewable energy capacity addition in India, Rajasthan is one of the front runners, which has an installed capacity of about 30 gigawatts, followed by Gujarat at about 29.5 gigawatts, followed by Tamil Nadu and Karnataka close by. When we look at the adoption of solar power, it has been increasing across the years. As a percentage of the total renewable energy production in India also, it has been increasing, as you can observe in this graph, and we will be able to achieve the target of 50% solar power out of the total renewable energy mix soon. And out of this 500 gigawatt of renewable energy target that we have set, that we are going to achieve by 2030, out of this 280 gigawatt will be coming from the solar power only, as per the targets that India has set for itself. Now, how do we utilize the solar energy? How do we convert the solar energy into electricity or usable power? There are 2 methods mainly. One is the direct conversion of the solar energy into electricity using the solar photovoltaic cells. The energy that falls upon Earth, the solar irradiation, that is in the form of light packets. We can say they are in the form of photons. When these photons, they are bombarded upon the solar photovoltaic cells, the photovoltaic cells, they convert it into electricity. How? The solar photovoltaic cells, they are consisted of semiconductors, usually the crystalline silicon semiconductors. When the photons bombard the semiconductors, they can either be absorbed, or they can be reflected, or they can be allowed to pass through. The photons which are absorbed by the semiconductors, that energy that the photons have, that is absorbed by the electrons in the semiconductor, because the photons, they are like particles having zero mass and they travel at the speed of light, but they have energy. That energy, if they are absorbed by the semiconductor, is transferred to the electrons in the semiconductor. Those electrons, after getting sufficient amount of energy from the photons, free themselves from their atoms and they are free to move in the semiconductor. And when this is connected to an external electrical load, they flow in the form of a current in the circuit. That is the simplest possible explanation of the electricity generation using a photovoltaic cell, a solar photovoltaic cell. Another way of using the solar energy is the indirect usage, that is the usage in the form of solar thermal energy. That is the solar irradiation that can be concentrated using large mirrors onto a small surface for the generation of heat. And that generated heat is used further to drive any turbine or to use that heat directly, for example, the solar water heaters, etc. Now coming to the need of solar energy, why do we need it in India? India is a country which has a demographic dividend at its disposal, and to utilize that demographic dividend we need energy. India is an energy hungry country and that energy demand will keep on increasing. As per the data of the International Energy Agency, the demand of energy in India is set to increase to more than 53 exajoules by 2030 and 73 exajoules by 2050. And India is already the third largest consumer of energy in the world. Likewise, we need a diversification of sources of energy. We do not want to be dependent upon oil or fossil fuels, and we are importing more than 80% of our crude oil that we need. Therefore, the diversification in the form of adoption of renewable energy, for which India can be self-reliant, will be better for economic growth in India. We also want to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions. For example, our commitments that we have given at the global platforms, for example, the Conference of Parties of the UNFCCC. Likewise, we want to be self-reliant in energy and we want to fulfill our global commitments, for example, net zero emissions by 2070. It will also lead to employment generation. It is projected that the adoption of the solar energy by India and the achievement of the solar energy targets of 280 gigawatts by 2030 will lead to the creation of about 3 million new jobs by 2030 in the solar sector. Likewise, it will be helpful for India to provide electricity in the remote and off-grid areas also. For example, the case study presented in this article as well, the connection of electricity in some off-grid villages in Jharkhand, which has been appreciated. It will empower the women also, especially. The solar energy adoption will empower women. For example, they will be employed as solar engineers, and these initiatives are particularly targeted at the employment of women as solar engineers. For example, the Barefoot College in India, the Grameen Shakti initiative in Bangladesh, the Solar Sister initiative in Africa. Likewise, it will help the women in generating more income if they are using solar power. For example, there is a case study of the Little Run of Kutch in Gujarat. The women there who were utilizing the salt, they were farming salt, they started using the solar pumps. The usage of the solar pumps in the salt farming in the Little Run of Kutch in Gujarat led to the increase in incomes to the extent of 90% for the women farmers in Gujarat. Likewise, there is an initiative We Care Solar in Uganda. The adoption of solar power by this initiative led to the reduction in the prenatal deaths by almost 70% in Uganda. Likewise, the Solar photovoltaic industry employs a lot of women. The percentage of workforce that is female in solar photovoltaic industry is quite high, and 40% of there are women in India in the solar photovoltaic industry. Now, what are the advantages of the adoption of solar power in India? It is also manifold. The solar power is a clean source of energy. Since it does not lead to any greenhouse gas emissions, the adoption of solar power in the households will lead to the reduction of health hazards. For example, the women will not be forced to resort to firewood or coal, which leads to the release of poisonous gases, the infection of lung cancer, etc., which will be eliminated. Likewise, it will help India in achieving its Panchamrit goals, the 5 goals that India has reiterated at the Conference of Parties, which include the net zero emissions by 2070, the 500 gigawatt of generation of renewable energy by 2030, 50% of the renewable energy should be there in the total energy mix of India by 2030, the 45% reduction in the carbon intensity by 2030, the 1 billion ton reduction in the carbon emission from the side of India by 2030, etc. Plus, there are no fuel costs when we are adopting the solar power. Therefore, the oil imports will be reduced, India's forex reserves will be saved. The solar energy generation, it can function as a standalone system. It does not need to be connected to a grid. Therefore, it will not be vulnerable to the loads on the grid, and it will be not prone to the failures. Plus, it is enjoying the advantage of modularity. Therefore, depending upon the power requirement, the size of the solar power plant can vary. We can install as many number of solar photovoltaic cells in parallel as we need. And there is an ease of installation for the solar power, and minimal maintenance is required. Since there are no moving parts, there is minimal wear and tear, and hence it enjoys a long operation life. Usually the solar power plants, they function for more than 25 years. But there are certain factors, there are certain limitations that the adoption of solar power in India has. The foremost limitation is the initial capital expenditure that is required to set up a solar photovoltaic cell plant. The solar power plant requires a huge initial investment. Plus, the solar energy production is intermittent in nature. It is dependent upon the sunlight and the intensity of sunlight. For example, the solar photovoltaic cells, they should be aligned towards the sunlight. If they are at an angle to the sunlight, then the efficiency will not be 100%, and the angle of incidence is of paramount importance, and the solar photovoltaic cells therefore need to be oriented in such a way that they follow the sun as the day goes along. Likewise, the increasing cloud cover in some months of the year, for example during the monsoon months, reduces the solar power production. Also, the increasing cloud cover during the western disturbances time, during the months of January, etc., the production of the solar power from the solar power plants comes down. Likewise, there is the issue of storage. Since the energy production from the solar plants is intermittent in nature, it needs to be stored so that the energy can be supplied during the night time also, or during the days when sun is not out, and it is dependent upon the temperature of the photovoltaic cells also. The production of the energy from the solar photovoltaic cells drops if the temperature of the solar photovoltaic cell increases. Plus, the efficiency of solar photovoltaic cells is quite less. It is about 15% only. Now, with the advent of the quantum dot solar photovoltaic cells, the efficiency has improved to about 18%, but still it is pretty low. Plus, the manufacturing of the solar photovoltaic cells, it is concentrated, usually in the 2 countries, one of them being China, and the end of life cycle management is still not proper. For example, how do we recycle the solar photovoltaic cells who have run out of their lifespan? Now, what are some of the government initiatives, the steps that the government has taken to promote the adoption of solar power in India? The government adopted the National Solar Mission to promote the solar energy adoption in India. Specifically, Prime Minister Surya Ghar Muft Bijli Yojana has promoted the adoption of rooftop solar power plants in India. It aims to install 1 crore rooftop solar plants in India. It has already installed close to 9 lakh rooftop solar plants in India. The government financially incentivizes the installation of the rooftop solar power plants by the households. The production linked incentive scheme for National Program on High Efficiency Solar Photovoltaic Modules incentivizes the manufacturers of solar photovoltaic cells. If the production capacity for the solar photovoltaic cells is increased by the manufacturers, they are financially incentivized by the government. The Solar Park scheme incentivizes the states. The states are financially incentivized to install solar parks in their states. The solar parks incentivized under this scheme are the ones which are having the production capacity of more than 500 megawatt. Under the PM Kusum scheme, the adoption of solar powered irrigation pumps is promoted. The agriculture is one of the largest consumers of electricity in India. To reduce the consumption of electricity by the agriculture sector from the grid connected electricity, the solar powered irrigation pumps are promoted in India through the PM Kusum scheme. India is also a leader in the International Solar Alliance. India promotes the international collaboration through the concepts like One Sun, One World, One Grid initiative so that we can collaborate with other countries in the solar energy production. The government comes up with various viability gap funding schemes so that the production of solar photovoltaic cells can be promoted in India and we are not dependent upon the imports of the photovoltaic cells from China and other countries. The government came up with the Canal Bank and Canal Top scheme. Through this scheme, the solar photovoltaic cells are installed on the canal banks. For example, the 100 megawatt floating solar project in Ramagundam. The government came up with the bundling scheme also, whereby the solar power is bundled along with the thermal power when it is sold or purchased. The Atal Jyoti Yojana promotes the solar powered street lighting also. There are a few other steps also to promote the adoption of solar power in India. For example, FDI is allowed in the solar sector, 100% FDI under the automatic route. The government also waives the interstate transmission system charges for the projects which are set up before June 2025. The declaration of trajectories allowed for the renewal purchase obligations up to 2030 also. The standards have been defined by the central government for the solar photovoltaic systems and devices in line with the international certifications. There are standard bidding guidelines which has been put in place by the government so that there is a competitive bidding which can be done for the purchase of electricity generated from the renewable energy sources also, and there is transparency in the bidding. The power dispatched against the letter of credits is allowed, that is, power can be purchased through advance payments also. This is to ensure that the distributors, the licensees distributors, they are paying the renewable energy generators on time and the renewable energy generators are not running into losses because of the lack of accrual of the revenues, because of the lack of receipt of payments for the electricity that they have supplied. The government also came up with the Green Energy Open Access Rules 2022 and the Green Term Ahead Market. Through the Green Term Ahead Market, the renewable energy can also be sold, it can also be purchased through the power exchanges. Now there is a previous year question also regarding the adoption of solar energy in India. In the prelims it was asked. You should be able to answer this now as it is asking regarding the photovoltaics as a technology generating electricity by direct conversion of light and solar thermal as a technology using it to generate heat which is further used in the electricity generation process. Please try to solve this question. There is a means practice question also. Discuss the current status of solar energy in the country, highlighting the advantages and limitations. Additionally, evaluate the government initiatives to promote the solar energy. Please try to write it. Now, the next article is related to India-Mauritius relations. The context behind it is that Prime Minister Modi is slated to visit Mauritius. and there is a speculation that the two countries may sign a white shipping agreement. So we will discuss the significance of India-Mauritius relations, especially the development in Agaliga Island taken up by India. This is important in GS2 under the topic Effect of Policies and Politics of Developed and Developing Countries on India's Interests and Indian Diaspora. First, let's take a look at the significance of Mauritius for India. India and Mauritius have cultural ties. 70% of the Mauritius population has Indian origin. They are people who were taken there by the British to work in the plantations there. Mauritius was also a colony under the British and the French, and most of the workers who were taken to Mauritius, they chose to reside there itself permanently. So we have cultural ties, and even India's biggest cultural center in the world is there in Mauritius only, Indira Gandhi Cultural Center in Mauritius. The World Hindi Secretariat is also there in Mauritius only. Even the National Day of Mauritius is celebrated on 12th of March. This is the date when Gandhiji took up the Dandi Yatra, and therefore it has connection with Mauritius also, because the Mauritius was also visited by Gandhiji while coming to India from Africa. We have strategic significance also. The Mauritius is important for us as we need cooperation for anti-piracy, maritime domain awareness, and the two navies, Indian Navy and the Navy of Mauritius, conduct joint patrolling exercises also in the Indian Ocean. We have upgraded the airstrip and the jetty at the Agaliga Island, bringing down the commute time from Agaliga to the mainland Mauritius in the Indian Ocean. We even sent our defense forces on deputation to Mauritius to help upgrade and uplift its own defense infrastructure also. Economically looking also, Mauritius is important for us because the two countries have signed a comprehensive economic cooperation and partnership agreement in 2021 that was done after about 15 years of negotiation. And Mauritius acts as a gateway for us for investment in Africa. We have Indian assisted projects also running there. India has invested heavily in Mauritius. For example, we have assisted Mauritius in building the Supreme Court building of Mauritius, in building the Metro Express project in Mauritius, in the social housing units which were inaugurated by Prime Minister only, the investment in high impact community development projects in Mauritius, which helps us in generating goodwill also among the Mauritius population towards India. We even give lines of credit to Mauritius. For example, recently $100 million line of credit was given for defense to Mauritius. The foreign direct investment also comes into India from Mauritius. 25% of the total FDI into India since 2000 has been coming from Mauritius, and in the fiscal year 23-24, Mauritius was the third largest source of FDI into India. Although there are allegations that this may be the money which has been round-tripped or the money which has been laundered and then coming back into India only. India-Mauritius had close cooperation during the times of COVID-19 also, and India has always been the first responder for Mauritius during the times of disaster relief, humanitarian assistance whenever it is required for Mauritius. Plus, the two countries, they share close ties geopolitically as well, as it is part of India's neighborhood first policy, as well as it is a maritime neighbor of India, and we have close cooperation in the global fora also. For example, Mauritius always supports India through the global fora like United Nations, etc. Now, let's also discuss the significance of Agaliga Island development specifically by India in Mauritius. It is an island which is located in the Indian Ocean region east of Madagascar and north of Mauritius. The Agaliga Island, it is a couple of islands, the North Agaliga and the South Agaliga. It is significant for Mauritius also because it will help in developing it economically. For example, the connectivity between the Agaliga Island and the Mauritius mainland will improve now because India has constructed an airstrip in Agaliga Islands. Earlier, the commute time between the Agaliga Islands and the Mauritius mainland was about 2 days. Now it has reduced to less than 1 hour's flight. It will lead to the employment generation for the local populace of the Agaliga Islands, as it will boost tourism there and the tourism potential will be utilized. It is strategically also important for Mauritius because it will be able to deploy its ships. The Mauritius Coast Guard ships can be deployed near Agaliga Islands. They can be anchored there and it will be able to ensure security in its neighborhood. It is significant for India specifically. For example, it will be important for us geostrategically. India will be able to fulfill its goal of security and growth for all in the region through the developments, through the investments that is done in the neighborhood, for example, the Agaliga Islands. It will be able to counter the Chinese influence also, because the Chinese has influenced the Indian neighbors in the neighborhood of the Indian Ocean region also through its string of pearls. For example, Maldives, which often takes the side of China also sometimes. Plus, Maldives will be able to provide India assistance in terms of the surveillance. India will be able to achieve its role of the net security provider in the Indian Ocean region. Will be able to achieve our status of a blue water navy. That way it will be the first stepping stone towards that, and we can become the voice of the global south by investing in the African region, by investing in Mauritius, in the Indian Ocean region, and we can avoid the crisis that is erupting in the Red Sea area because of the piracy which is rampant in the Red Sea region. Alternative trade routes can be explored, and one of them can be passing from nearby the Mozambique Channel and Agaliga Islands. Likewise, it will help India in deepen the relations with Mauritius. The goodwill that India is generating in Mauritius because of such investment and infrastructure building activities, high impact community development projects will be deepened, and will be able to monitor the exclusive economic zone. Along with Mauritius, will be able to conduct more joint patrolling exercises, will be able to conduct hydrographic surveys along with Mauritius and exploit the minerals, the natural resources that the Indian Ocean offers, and will be able to cooperate in disaster relief and assist in the humanitarian assistance as well. So for that purpose only, India has upgraded the airstrip and the jetty at the Agaliga Island, which is located in the North Agaliga Island. Geopolitically as well, it is significant for India because the Agaliga Island, it lies near the Mozambique Channel, and Mozambique Channel is significant because it lies nearby the critical trade route. With the vulnerability of the Suez Canal increasing because of the instability, the non-existence of long-term peace in the Middle East region, the Mozambique becomes even more important, and this trade route will become even more significant in the coming times. There are natural resources also in the region. For example, the natural gas availability, the availability of iron ore, graphite, gold, rubies and rare earth minerals also, which will help in the production of renewable energy also in the future. Now, another aspect of India-Mauritius relations that is significant for us is the amendment done to the Double Taxation Avoidance Agreement. First, what is the Double Taxation Avoidance Agreement? If a company is operating in more than one countries, then it should be taxed at any one place. The profit that a multinational company generates should not be taxed in all the countries in which it is having operations. For example, if a country is operating in both Mauritius and India, then it should not be taxed in both India and Mauritius. It should be taxed at any one jurisdiction. Therefore, a double taxation avoidance agreement is usually put into place between the two countries so that the profit is taxed at that jurisdiction wherever it is generated usually. But the multinational companies, they usually abuse such treaties. They shift their profits to those jurisdictions which are having lower tax to avoid the high tax payment. So to counter such treaty abuse, to counter the tax evasion or avoidance, an amendment was done to the Double Taxation Avoidance Agreement between India and Mauritius. This amendment applies to all incomes, whether it is through capital gains, dividends or the fees that are given for the technical services which are provided by various companies, the sister companies, subsidiary companies of various companies. What does it propose? It proposes the adoption of a principal purpose test. Now, what is this principal purpose test? It means that the purpose behind any transaction, any agreement or arrangement will be seen to determine whether it will be entitled to duty benefit, to tax benefit under the double taxation avoidance agreement. If the principal purpose of the transaction undertaken was just to get the duty benefit, was just to get the tax benefit, then tax benefit will not be given. The Article 27B was accordingly introduced in the double taxation avoidance agreement through the amendment, and therefore it denies treaty benefits such as reduced withholding taxes on interest, royalties and dividends, etc. The impact of that will be that if there is any cross-border structuring of investments into India or out of India via Mauritius, they will have the implications of the base erosion and profit shifting. That is, the companies will not have to be able to transfer the profits to the lower tax domain. Now, there is a mains practice question also. Discuss the significance of India-Mauritius ties with a focus on key areas such as Agaliga Island development and the recent amendment of the double taxation avoidance agreement. Please try to write it. The next article is related to the cotton crop and the imports of cotton into India. This is important in GS3 under the topic major crops, cropping pattern in various parts of the country. Before coming to the article, let's discuss a few basics regarding the growing conditions and the challenges regarding the growing of cotton in India. Cotton requires a hot and sunny climate to grow. It requires long frost-free periods. It requires frost-free periods of at least 210 days to mature. It requires the temperatures ranging from 21 to 30 degrees Celsius. And it requires a rainfall of 50 to 75 centimeters annually. Regarding the soil types that can grow the cotton, it can be grown on the black cotton soil in the Deccan Plateau region. It can also be grown on the deep alluvial soils in the northern India. It can also grow on the black clayey soils in the central India as well as the mixed black and red soils in the south India, provided that these climatic conditions are fulfilled. Additionally, it is sensitive to waterlogging. It is vulnerable to waterlogging. It should not happen in that area where it is grown, but it can tolerate a certain amount of salinity. Considering that it is a kharif crop, it requires about 6 to 8 months to mature. But there are certain challenges regarding the growth of cotton crop in India. One, it often gets infested with the pink bollworm pest. This pest has reduced the cotton yield in India by about 1/3. 35% cotton yields have reduced in the states of Gujarat, Punjab, Haryana, Rajasthan whenever this pest attack on the cotton crop happens. Additionally, the yields of the cotton crop have been unpredictable. It is due to the limited irrigation, due to the areas which are rain-fed and declining soil fertility also. The weather has been erratic as well because of the climate change. There are unexpected droughts, excessive rainfall as well sometimes. The traditional farming methods is another challenge because usually there are small scale farmers who are growing cotton and they do not have access to enough funds to access the modern technology, and they do not have access to the modern technology which can improve the cotton yield, the productivity. Likewise, the rainfed cultivation for the cotton accounts for 2/3 cotton cultivation in India. The yields therefore have been low. We have a yield of an average of 480 kg of cotton production per hectare in India, whereas the global average production has been 800 kg of cotton production per hectare. Now, what are some of the government initiatives to promote the cotton production in India? One, the government came up with the Cotton Development Program. This was an initiative under the National Food Security Mission itself and implemented by the Department of Agriculture. The government also set up the Cotton Corporation of India. This corporation stabilizes the prices of cotton whenever the market rates fall. It financially incentivizes the farmers. The government arrived upon an formula for the MSP, the minimum support prices. It is usually fixed at 1.5 times the production cost. The government also set up the Textile Advisory Group. This Textile Advisory Group coordinates among all the stakeholders and it ensures uniformity in the productivity, the pricing and the branding along the entire cotton value chain in India. There is the establishment of a Coat Ally mobile app also. Through this app, the MSP rates are informed to the cotton farmers Additional information is also given regarding the procurement centers nearby which procure cotton from the farmers. The establishment of a committee was also done for the cotton promotion and consumption. This was to ensure a steady cotton supply to the textile industry in India. Now, where is cotton produced in India? Chiefly, you can observe it is in this region. The largest producers of cotton in India are number 1 Gujarat, followed by Maharashtra, Telangana, Rajasthan, Karnataka, Andhra Pradesh, and then Haryana and Madhya Pradesh. Now, coming to the article, it highlights a few challenges faced by the cotton farmers. One of the challenges is the low yield. The yield of cotton in India is just about 450 kg of cotton per hectare, whereas in Brazil it is quite high, almost reaching 2000 kg of cotton per hectare. Likewise, there are price discrepancies also. The cost of production of cotton is estimated to be about 9,000 rupees per quintal, whereas the MSP is fixed at just about 7,200 rupees per quintal, and the open market prices, they have been even lower at about 5,000 to 5,500 rupees per quintal of cotton. Plus the international prices, they have also remained weak, and because of the weak international prices, the imports of cotton have increased. As we can observe that from August to October in 2024, the imports of cotton were quite high as compared to August to October of 2023. Now, what are the government initiatives in this regard? In the union budget, the government has introduced the cotton mission. The cotton mission aims to improve the productivity of cotton in India, to improve the yield of cotton in India. The import policies have ensured that the extra long staple cotton enjoys a duty-free import, and the exporters can import cotton duty-free under the advanced authorization scheme. Now, when we look at the global market dynamics, the international prices, since they have remained low, therefore the imports are attractive. Therefore, the textile producers in India, the garment producers in India, they are importing raw cotton from other countries. But the export demand of Indian garments simultaneously has risen. Because of the export demand for Indian garments, they import raw cotton from the other countries, then make garments in India, because 60% of the garments that are made and exported from India are based upon cotton, and then they are exported. Now, the next article is related to rubber crop. This is important in GS3 under the topic Major Crops, Cropping Pattern in Various Parts of the Country. Before coming to the article, let's discuss a few basics regarding rubber also. The natural rubber, it is a polymer of isoprene, and it is a native plant of Amazon basin. This was not originally there in Asia and Africa. The natural rubber plant was introduced in Asia and Africa in the early 19th century. This was introduced by the colonizers. So this is chiefly an equatorial crop, but this can also be grown in tropical as well as subtropical regions. How is rubber extracted from the rubber trees? It is harvested from the latex of the trees. The rubber, it is used mainly in the industrial products. For example, the automobile tires, they account for more than 50% of the rubber consumption in India, and it is used because it has a high tensile strength and it has vibration damping properties also. Now, what are the growing conditions for growing rubber? Rubber requires humidity of about 80%. So it grows in moist and humid conditions. It requires a rainfall of more than 200 centimeters annually. 200 to 300 centimeter of rainfall is required annually for the rubber plant to grow. It requires a sunshine of about 2000 hours simultaneously. And regarding the soil, it can grow on the well-drained loamy soil, which can be lateritic, alluvial or sedimentary. But simultaneously, it requires the temperature of more than 25 degrees Celsius to grow. So there are very peculiar conditions in which the natural rubber plant grows. Also, it can grow on the elevations from 300 to 450 meters above the sea level on the hill slopes. But if the elevation level increases further, then the yields will decline, because as the height increases, then the temperature will be lower and the soil will be less mature. Now, when we look at the major producers of the natural rubber across the world, the major producers include Thailand, Indonesia and Malaysia. Within India, if we see, India is the third largest producer of rubber in the world. India is also the fourth largest consumer. About 90% of the rubber production in India is done through small holdings only, small rubber plantations. And 90% of India's rubber production happens in Kerala itself, followed by Tamil Nadu and Karnataka. Now coming to the article, the Rubber Board has come up with a geo-mapping initiative for the rubber. Why? The objective is to improve the market access for the rubber growers. The rubber plantations that will be geotagged, and it will ensure market access as it will ensure the origin of the rubber which can be certified, and there will be better prices that the rubber produce can command. This is part of the Indian Sustainable Natural Rubber Framework, ISNR framework, and this also aligns with the EUDR guidelines. The European Union Deforestation Regulation compliance will be there. What is the process? The process will be digital mapping of the land ownership area and plantation boundaries so that the rubber origin can be ascertained. What is the importance for this? It will ensure global compliance firstly, because the deforestation-free supply chain is required for exports to European Union countries, especially for the rubber products. It will be mandatory for EUDR compliance. Plus, it will ensure certification. This certification, that is ISNR certification, guarantees the origin of rubber, and it includes a due diligence certificate also. This certificate will be based on the risk assessment and legality analysis that it has been sourced from legal origins only. Now, the next article is related to the oil imports into India from USA. This is important in GS2 under the topic Effect of Policies and Politics of Developed and Developing Countries on India's Interests and Indian Diaspora. The article says that India has given certain commitments to USA. India has agreed to purchase more oil from USA, crude oil from USA. The imports may rise from $15 billion to $25 billion. Already the crude oil imports from USA have been rising. In 2024, it was about 220,000 barrels per day. In 2025, it has risen to more than 3.5 lakh barrels per day. It becomes costly for India because there is a long distance that it has to travel. Therefore, the logistic cost increases actually. But there is a trade surplus that India enjoys with USA. In the bilateral trade, there is a trade surplus of $45 billion from the side of India in 2024. So what has India agreed upon now? India has agreed that yes, we will try to achieve the bilateral trade target. The two countries have set the bilateral trade target to double the bilateral trade to $500 billion in the next 5 years. For achieving this bilateral trade target, there will be improvement in the energy ties. India will be importing more energy, more crude oil and natural gas from USA. Even the liquefied natural gas, LNG also we will be importing from USA. The LNG supply is crucial for India also. The USA is going to become a leading LNG and crude oil supplier to India, and we will increase the trade in ethane and petroleum products in general. For that, there will be investments done in oil and gas infrastructure. Additionally, there will be cooperation with USA, and US has agreed that we will strengthen our civil nuclear energy cooperation, and US will support India in its membership bid for the International Energy Agency also. Now, when we discuss the oil and gas needs for India, it is significant because India is dependent upon the imports, and this import of crude oil has increased. In 2023-24, the crude oil imported by India out of the total needs was 87.8%, and the domestic production remains less than 13% only. We need to increase it. The petroleum product imports is also significant as it is more than $22 billion, which causes a dent on the forex reserves of India. Likewise, the natural gas consumption target has increased. For India, we want to increase the natural gas share from 6% in the energy mix now to 15% to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions also. When we look at the energy sourcing, we have diverse sourcing of energy. For example, we imported the oil from Russia also. From Russia, we increased our oil imports post the Ukraine war. Post-Ukraine war, the crude oil that we import from Russia went to almost 40% of our total oil imports. Earlier it was less than 1%. That was because we were getting discounted oil from Russia amid the sanctions which were imposed by the Western nations, by the European nations, by the G7 upon Russia because of its invasion into Ukraine. And simultaneously, now we are going to diversify our supply chain, because now the US and other Western Hemisphere countries, including Brazil, Canada also, they will be emerging as the key oil suppliers into India. When we look at India's energy roadmap, we want actually to reduce the import dependency. We want to reduce the crude oil dependence that we import, and we want to promote the renewable fuels. For example, the ethanol blending program, for example, the adoption of biogas, the adoption of biodiesel. And simultaneously, we want to improve the electrical vehicle adoption also. For example, the FAME 2.0 scheme, the building of more infrastructure for electrical vehicles like the development of charging infrastructure, etc. Now, the next article is related to the 100-day TB elimination campaign that the government started on December 7, 2024. This is important in GS2 under the topic health. This article is a little critical, saying that the 100-day TB elimination campaign has fallen short of achieving its objectives. This was launched in December 7, 2024, and it was launched in 455 intervention districts across 33 states and union territories in India. Who were targeted under this campaign? The target groups included vulnerable and high-risk populations, that is the people who were diabetic, who were smokers, who were HIV patients, or who were past TB patients, geriatric population, and even the household contacts, the family members of the TB patients. What were the objective of this TB elimination campaign? The objective was to screen and test for TB. And this screening was done even for the subclinical, even for the asymptomatic cases. That is the people who were not even showing symptoms of TB, but they were in the high risk population. They were also screened for TB infection. And even chest x-rays were done, followed by molecular tests for bacteriological confirmation. The objective of the campaign was not only diagnosing TB in people who show symptoms, but also detecting the asymptomatic TB cases. For early detection, the chest x-rays were used for the screening, but only 836 vans were available with the portable x-ray machines who were screening the high-risk population across the 455 odd intervention districts, and only 3.8 lakh of over 10 crore individuals were screened using x-rays, which is just about 3.8% of the targeted vulnerable population. A substantial population among the 3.8 lakh people screened using x-ray had no symptoms of TB. The total TB notifications across India have increased between the December 7, 2024 and February 22, 2025 by only 44,000 only as compared to the data of the previous year during the same period. So therefore, the number of TB cases notified have increased by 81,000 to 1,15,000 each year in the last few years. Now, what are the challenges of the TB elimination campaign that the article highlights? It highlights that only 3.8% of the 10 crore screened individuals underwent chest x-rays, since there were limited number of vans equipped with the portable x-ray machines, and it is limited to a substantial population without TB symptoms. The exact numbers were not disclosed in the survey, as it is claiming that 3.5 lakh TB cases were detected in the intervention districts, but it will not be correct to attribute the detection of those 3.5 lakh TB cases only to this 100-day intensified TB elimination campaign, since the data when compared to the previous year, it is almost similar. The infrastructure constraints are there because of the limited availability of the vans with portable x-ray machines, and there was a limited usage of the AI assisted tools, the limited use of untested HTA unapproved AI tools for x-ray interpretation, and the campaign duration of 100 days is too short to achieve a TB elimination by 2025. Now, the next article is related to Consumer Dispute Redressal Commission. This is important in GS2 under the topic governance. 3 Bollywood stars, Ajay Devgan, Shah Rukh Khan and Tiger Shroff were issued notices by the Consumer Dispute Redressal Commission for false and misleading advertisements for pan masala. The tagline reads, "Dane dane mein hai kesar ka dam." But how is it possible? Saffron is a very costly product, about 4 lakh rupees per kg, and gutka costs 5 rupees. So it's not possible. Therefore, a complaint was filed under the Consumer Protection Act section 35 and section 89 that it was misleading advertisement, and any manufacturer or service provider who causes a misleading or false advertisement to be made which is prejudicial to the interest of the consumers is liable to imprisonment. He can be sent to jail for up to 2 years. So therefore, false and misleading advertisement is an offense punishable by law. So in this context, let's also have a look at the National Consumer Disputes Redressal Commission. It's a quasi-judicial commission. It was set up under the Consumer Protection Act 1986. This act covers both goods as well as services. Now, what is the mandate of this National Consumer Disputes Redressal Commission? The mandate is to provide inexpensive, speedy and summary redressal of the consumer disputes. That is, fast and cheap resolution of the consumer grievances. The head of the commission is a sitting or a retired judge of the Supreme Court or a chief justice of any high court. The jurisdiction of the National Consumer Dispute Redressal Commission extends to those complaints who are valued above 2 crore rupees. It also has the appellate and revisional jurisdiction. That is, the decisions of the state dispute redressal commissions can also be appealed in the National Consumer Disputes Redressal Commission. Who can file a complaint in the commission? Any consumer or any voluntary consumer association also which is registered under the Companies Act can file a complaint, or the central government or any state government can also file a complaint in the National Consumer Disputes Redressal Commission. The appeals against the decision of the National Consumer Disputes Redressal Commission lie in front of the Supreme Court. The appeal has to be filed within 30 days. Thank you.